Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. I'm Bryce Duskett. As we make our way through the month of January, we have another informative episode lined up for you with a look at both the grain and livestock markets. We'll get into those reports here in a moment, but first, as we start things off today, we're looking ahead to some of those warmer months coming up this spring. Before we know it, planting season will be upon us. While there are many things to consider before the tractors get rolling, one thing to always keep in mind before any busy season is farm and ranch safety. During this year's Nebraska Ag Expo, we talked with the University of Nebraska Medical Center's Dr. Aaron Yoder to see how he was addressing that topic. With so many things to worry about in the agricultural industry, safety concerns may not always be at the forefront of the mind for many ag producers. However, injuries on the job can have a detrimental impact on time available to accomplish goals and contribute to unforeseen expenses.
So we want to present some topics that will help producers both be more productive and have less financial costs incurred. So injuries, if they do happen on operations, cost time and money. So how do we prevent those type of injuries? How do we keep people healthier and safer out there? So some things like having risk management plans. Oftentimes when we talk of risk management, we think about crop losses and weather-related incidents, but we can also picture that around legal risks and human risks. Employees aren't easy to find these days, so keeping our employees safe and healthy will help us keep our employees happier, and it's going to keep them around longer, and we're going to have them there to work for us.
Accidents can happen anytime, anywhere. However, some types of accidents are more common than others, and for the most part, should be more easily avoidable.
Sure. So the cropping type systems, we often will see machinery related injuries. Tractor rollovers are still one of the big things we see, and machinery entanglements. If we're harvesting crops, you know, the grain storage structures, grain bins and grain bin safety. And then if we're dealing with animals, we have some projects in feed yard safety. So the cowboys, there aren't many regulations out there on how to handle a horse. And we know that they're animals that have their own mind. So the animal side of safety, and then just managing the animals, managing their feed and feeding. So there's less seasonality in the animal agriculture. You're doing the same thing day in, day out, which is good and bad. And then in the cropping side, you're doing different tasks all the time, so you don't always think of the hazards. So there's different perspectives based on what type of operation you have.
Finally, when it comes to farm machinery and tools, you'll want to be certain you are up to date on machine manuals and maintenance. Furthermore, you'll want to ensure you're using the right tools for the right job.
Sure. So keeping your machinery maintained, so proper maintenance, so it's not breaking down in the field and you don't have unexpected events happening. That'll help keep you safer out there. Looking at the owner's manual or user's manual to make sure that you're doing the maintenance, that you're following all the safety precautions that are there. Around machinery, making sure the guards are in place and that you're using the machinery properly. And that always reminds me of shop safety. We were always told not to use a screwdriver as a hammer. So making sure we're using the appropriate tools when we're doing the tasks that we're doing not only makes them easier, more productive, but also safer.
If you would like to learn more about farm safety, you can visit the link on the screen. We've also posted the URL to the Market Journal website. Moving on to the grain markets now, fertilizer prices, shipping challenges, and the weather in South America continue to impact the markets. To break down the latest information, we were joined on Tuesday by DTN lead analyst Todd Hultman. I began the discussion by asking Todd if he thought we could continue to see $6 corn.
I think $6 corn is going to be tough to maintain this year. Right now, we're enjoying some South American weather threat. We've had dry conditions in Brazil and Argentina that have helped give corn prices a lift. Late in 2021, we got a real nice boost for corn from the ethanol side of the market. We had some very strong margins at the plants that really helped corn bids throughout the country coming from those ethanol plants, but that ethanol demand has slowed down since. We've seen the ethanol inventory come up higher, so other than the uncertainty of what lies ahead for South America, I don't know what there is a lot in terms of giving us a strong bullish argument to maintain corn at this $6 level. So I'm a little concerned that opportunity may not last too long here early in 2022.
Todd, certainly one of the things a lot of producers have been tracking is the price of fertilizer. As you and your team there at DTN have evaluated that, are you thinking we might see some relief as we near the spring, or you expect prices to remain high for fertilizer?
Boy, you know, I wish I could say there's relief ahead, but to be honest, I think it's going to be very difficult for fertilizers to come down between now and planting time. We're just in kind of a tough situation here as far as fertilizer availability. It was encouraging to me that the natural gas prices come down. You know, after Hurricane Ida last fall, we saw those natural gas prices spike higher, and that was part of the fuel that kind of lit the fuse on the fertilizer situation. Those gas prices have come down, but I think it's still tough, and we still seem to be very vulnerable as far as importing the fertilizer we need for planting time.
Let's talk about the soybean market. Todd, we've seen some strong crush and demand for oil there, leading to some higher prices for soybeans here in the near term. What do you make of that market as we move forward through 2022?
Yeah, Bryce, this is one part of the market where I'm fairly optimistic on long term. And, you know, for a long time, it was demand for soybean meal that was really the stronger leg of the two soybean products. But now we've got some new renewable diesel products on the biodiesel side of the market that has given higher value now to the bean oil side of the equation. So at the present time, we're experiencing crush margins that are historically quite high. You know, typically we see crush products total maybe $1 or $1.50 above the cost of soybeans. Well, recently we've been more like $2.50 and above. So this is very attractive time for the crush margin and for the crush side of demand on soybeans. The one thing holding the soybean market back, though, has been a disappointment with our exports and specifically to China this year. They're down about 28% from a year ago. So as good as that crush demand has been domestically, we've had a lot of that offset by disappointing exports.
As we look back to the last time you appeared on Market Journal, Todd, you gave some of the details about the challenges that folks might be facing as they're trying to haul grain across the ocean. Prices skyrocketed here when it comes to the supply chain disruptions. Have we seen an ease of that over the past month and a half, 2 months since you last appeared on Market Journal?
You know, Bryce, there is steady progress, but I have to say it's very slow. First of all, we need to get people back to work so we can get the country moving again, no matter what the transportation need is, or unsnarling a lot of the log jams at the ports. We need to get people back to work. And we're still about 2.7 million jobs short of where we were before the pandemic hit in 2020. And then as far as the shipping costs go that you asked about, the cost of a Panamax vessel from the U.S. Gulf to northern China is still up about 50% from where it was a year ago. So we've seen improvement. We're down from the peak that was made in October. But it's taking time, and I think it's just not an easy situation to solve, and I think easily another 6 months to try to kind of normalize this process, but it's definitely taking longer than a lot of us would like.
Before I let you go, Todd, final thoughts from you. Any risk management advice you'd like to leave our viewers with today?
Yeah, well, anyone at home, I want you to think long and hard about if you have old crop corn or beans in the bins. These are actually very good prices. And we're enjoying a little benefit now because we've had some weather threat in South America, and nobody can guarantee just how bad that threat will get or how long it'll last. So I think you have to think pretty seriously here about taking some risk off the table in old crop corn and soybeans. For new crop commitments, I'd be very careful, especially in the case of corn. It's going to depend a lot on your fertilizer needs, and it's going to depend a lot on if you have access to irrigation or if you feel like you're in a drought area. That's going to be very tough to make commitments to production. So I'm not as eager to jump out there making commitments on the new crop price just yet, but to old crop, I think it's a good time to take a good hard look.
Good things to remind our viewers of. Todd, appreciate you coming on the program today.
Thank you, Bryce. My pleasure.
Thanks to Todd for his time and insights in the grain markets this week. Shifting our focus to the cattle markets, COVID-19 continues to disrupt processing capacity. On Wednesday, we visited with Mike Briggs of Briggs Feedyard to get his thoughts on how big of an impact this new variant of COVID is having on the cattle industry.
We backed up cattle in 2020 from COVID, and it took till clear in August this year to kind of get it cleaned up, July, August to kind of get caught back up. So if we start backing cattle up here, first and foremost, it's going to ruin our spring rally that we typically get, that we're all waiting for. And it's just going to back cattle up, and it's going to destroy this market. The other thing it's doing already is now packers are running the same play, just like in football, keep running it till they stop it. They're running this same deal where now their margins are just going skyrocketing because the price of beef is going up because they've got a chokehold on it again, and we're getting our price beaten down again. So they're just making money hand over fist. So they have no incentive to do anything different is my point. And so this could really be a problem.
We're starting to talk about some of these factors driving the market right now, but in general, we're looking late January at this point of time of broadcast. What do you make of the cattle market right now, and what are you looking forward to?
Well, because of the backup and the lack of slaughter, I think we're going to struggle a little bit with selling prices because of lack of slaughter. Now, as we go through, our numbers are going to continually get smaller and smaller if our kill capacity is where it's supposed to be. So I think the market's going to be pretty good. If they back these cattle up on us, it's just going to be a slow plodding. Yeah, we might stay in the 130s, which is better than in the 90s where we were a year ago or so, but you hate to see your profit opportunities getting taken away from us, because it's been a long 2.5 years if you've been a cattle feeder. It has not been fun. And they're finally getting to where we can make a little money and kind of get our head above water a little bit, and then they're going to take us and dunk us again, is my fear. But like I said, I think this is going to burn through us at a decent pace, and maybe we can get going because the packer is making a lot of money, so he does have incentive to slaughter.
This week on Market Journal, our grain analyst Todd Hultman noted that $6 corn, he doesn't expect it to last very long. Historically speaking, though, Mike, lower corn prices mean higher feeder prices for cattle. Do you think that'll be a trend we'll see in the near future?
Well, I disagree with that, gentleman, wholeheartely, because I'm concerned about the drought in South America. They've gotten some rain the last few days. We beat the corn market down Monday. It was down lower yesterday and finished higher. Today it's up quite a bit. I think there's going to be a lot of upward pressure in the corn market, and I think that's going to hold feeders in check. Like I've said for, gosh, I don't know how long now, if you buy cattle, you better buy your corn, because this thing could get loose on us. You're going to have a smaller crop in South America, so that's going to put more pressure on the northern hemisphere crop. The corn market's going to try to buy acres, so I think this corn price stays elevated for quite a while. And if you don't see this La Nina burn out in June and have it start raining, you're a long ways from corn price staying down. So there's a lot of risks there at this corn market. I disagree with that gentleman. I don't think we're done yet.
Well, we've got a cattle on feed report coming out later this week, but that'll be out before our broadcast. So let's get a preview of some of your thoughts of what we could expect with that.
I think you're going to see really good marketings, maybe somewhere in the +2%, +5%. Once again, packers were very profitable. Demand was excellent. So I think there's going to be a lot of pull through. So I think you're going to see good marketings. Along with that, I think you're going to see really good placements. I know we just got a tsunami of cattle in December, which was really nice. Typically, you don't see a lot of cattle move in December. A lot of guys are holding them till after the first of the year, but you saw a lot of cattle move and a lot of cattle placed. So, and there was some profit opportunities there. So I think you're going to see a big placement number, probably +10%.
I want to get to a producer question we had this week. Producer asked the question for that guy out there feeding livestock, or cow-calf guy perhaps, that has less than 100 head. What do you see as the future for them in this industry? Is there going to be room for that smaller producer in the cattle side of things?
I think, if that's an add-on to his regular business where he's a farmer, yeah, because I think calves, if corn doesn't get too far out of line, the cow-calf guy is going to get his turn here, because we've liquidated cows like crazy the last 3 years. So there's not going to be a lot of calves for sale. I've heard some prognosticators think that next fall packers are going to have trouble finding 5 days worth of slaughter. That will be an interesting situation I have never seen. could be very profitable for the guy in the feed yard if he's got fat cattle. If that happens, that's going to push feeder prices up. So I think that guy's got profitability in his future. You know, the thing I see as we go forward and talking to a lot of my customers that do cow-calf, to find grass for summer is just becoming so hard, and it's so pricey what is left out there. So that's a challenge for it. If you don't own your grass, that could be an insurmountable challenge. I don't know.
Final word is yours this week, Mike. What else would you like to leave our viewers with?
Well, I'm optimistic in the cattle business. I think you kind of always have to be because it's pretty big struggle. But if we don't get cattle backed up here and we keep chugging along with slaughter, I think demand is really good, and I think there's going to be some profitability. Now, do you want to run out there like a drunken sailor and just buy cattle like crazy and not protect yourself? Absolutely not. You better be protecting your corn. Now, as far as risk management strategy, I'd probably want to be a buyer of puts and a seller of calls, set myself up a window there, because I want to give this market a chance to run if it's going to run.
Don't be the drunken sailor. That's the message of the week.
Yes.
Mike Briggs, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks again to both our market analysts this week. Next week, we'll be joined by Darren Newsom of Darren Newsom Analysis. If you have a question you'd like for me to ask him, please get in touch with us on social media or on email, and we'll be sure to pass that question along. When Frank Zybock first developed his center pivot prototype back in 1947, he was just trying to figure out a way to take out the backbreaking labor part of his irrigation systems. Zybock, who passed away in Columbus, Nebraska in 1980, probably never truly realized how much his invention would change the productivity of agriculture, not just here in the plains, but around the world. Zybock, who is being formally inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame this upcoming May, is the focus of a series of articles that you can read in the January issue of the Nebraska Farmer. What is now time for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Well, Al, it's not to my enjoyment, but we're finally seeing a bit of a winter cool down this week. What are things looking like as we turn to the new week?
Well, Bryce, we did have some cold air come in during the middle of the week, kind of a rude awakening after some of the warmth we had earlier in the week. In a lot of locations, especially across eastern Nebraska, we've seen a 30-degree drop in our high temperatures from Tuesday to Wednesday. Doesn't look like we're going to see that significant of a temperature change for eastern Nebraska as we go into the middle of next week, but certainly another shot of cold air is coming. So enjoy this weekend. It's probably going to be the warmest we're going to see into the early part of next week before we see that cold air once again return into our region. More importantly, at least from the standpoint of cold air, we're not seeing what the upper Great Lakes regions are seeing. They have a lot of locations haven't been above freezing since the beginning of the year. So from that point, we're thankful we've seen some of this warm air move in on occasion. So let's take a look at the upper air models. And the first thing I'll draw your attention to is we have a trough over the Great Lakes region. This cold air looks like it's just going to clip northeast Nebraska and slide off toward the east. So we're going to see some cooler temperatures in the mid-30s across the northeast. Low pressure basically at the surface over south central North Dakota will generate some light flurry activity. No significant accumulations are expected. And by the time we get to Sunday, that trough will start to shift toward the east. That'll allow that warmth from the southwest to start building into the western half of the state. We should actually make it into the upper 40s, low 50s across portions of southwest and southern panhandle, more like the lower 40s across the eastern part of the state, with flurry activity continuing across the Great Lakes region. Now on Monday, this trough starts to flatten out somewhat, so we're going to get a downsloping flow from the west. That will allow temperatures to move up into the 50s across the west and probably in the mid to upper 40s across the east, except for the northeast where we may still confine to the lower 40s. Flurry activity pretty persistent across the northern plains, kind of cuts off across northeast Nebraska. On Tuesday, we'll see a continuation of that warmth, but we also will be dealing with a high pressure system sliding in from the north, reinforce the cold air. As that slides in, we'll see some flurry activity mainly to the east of Nebraska and some more concentrated snow across the Ohio River Valley. By the time we get into Wednesday, the cold air will start to modify the west of us, but in eastern Nebraska, we're still going to be confined to the 20s to the low 30s. Low pressure starts to develop in northeastern portions of New Mexico, generate a little light flurry activity, and that system will start to progress toward the east and become a major storm as we go into the weekend. We get one more shot of cold air coming down the back side of this trough to reinforce the cold, and then we will start to see some fairly significant warming from west to east. So flurry activity over the central Rockies, northern plains, and this coastal storm, which will become a doozy as we go into the weekend, starts to really get its act together as this trough digs and pulls that cold air well south. This storm the next weekend will ride up the eastern seaboard, once again giving them a large snowstorm. For us, we'll start to see a warming trend as high pressure from the west starts to build into our region. 8 to 14-day forecast indicates from next Thursday to the following Tuesday that the core of the cold will remain over the eastern United States. And in terms of precipitation, we start to see a trend change in the northwest with moisture starting to come into the northern Rockies.
Thanks, Al. Finally today, carbon credits have become a bit of a buzz term here in the agriculture industry when discussing ways to combat the changing climate. The credits can be a new source of revenue for agricultural producers. However, this is still a fairly new concept, and at the moment, the marketplace for carbon credits is a bit like the Wild West. Market Journal's Mike Straw recently caught up with Agro Carbon Alliance's Keith Byerly at this year's Nebraska Ag Expo to get a better understanding of how carbon credits can benefit producers and the land that they steward.
Regardless of the practices used, carbon credits can be beneficial whether you're a farmer or a rancher.
Carbon credits really don't differ for farmers and ranchers. How they're generated, the practices that they utilize to do them are going to be a little bit different just because of the different nature of farming versus ranching, but there's also a lot of overlap there as well. Grazing crop residue or grazing cover crops on crop ground is a qualifying practice that helps growers generate carbon credits. That's going to be that cross transition between the two, but for farmers, it comes down to tillage and cover crops, and for ranchers, it comes down to species diversity, forage utilization, and rotation.
One of the biggest challenges in the carbon credit market today is the idea of additionality.
One of the biggest challenges in the carbon credit market to date has been this idea of additionality, and additionality is what drives the value of these carbon credits. There are different types of carbon that can be generated based off of what's done, just like a grade through a C grade, if you will. And the growers today are wanting the most value is in those A grades, which comes from new practices. So growers that have traditionally been no-tilling for 15, 25 years, things like that, might feel like they're left out of this first generation of ag carbon markets, and they have been to a degree, but with utilization of livestock and things like that, again, grazing on that ground, they can be included in what that is. So it definitely is a factor where a lot of times growers might feel like they're already doing the qualifying practices, but when we stack practice upon practice to continue to escalate the value of the carbon and the value of the soil health to the grower, we can qualify almost any grower regardless of what historical practices they put in place.
Ag carbon is so new, some are even calling it the Wild West of agriculture. And there is some mistrust with the industry. However, with new adaptations and rapid changes, ag carbon is becoming more clear to growers.
Ag carbon is so new, and there's been so many players in it in recent history that a lot of growers, a lot of ranchers use that term quite often, the Wild West of agriculture. And to a degree, you can certainly understand there's a flood of information that's coming at these growers today, and they don't necessarily always know who it's coming from or where it's coming from. So that inherently has tended to build a little bit of mistrust in this industry, just like anything that's new, whether it's technology or farming practices or whatever. But you can also see that as quickly as this has evolved with with new adaptations to how we look at tillage management, how we incorporate livestock into operations and things like that, it's changing so rapidly that just like the days of the Wild West were kind of numbered at one point in time and it was becoming tamer by the day, that's exactly what's happening to ag carbon at this time as well. It's getting tamer by the day, and more clarity and more definition of the players and what they want and what they need, and less confusion all the time.
Continuing to learn new processes and practices will drive yields in either grain or grasses.
So none of these are going to really hinder your production output in the long term, but just like when we adopt anything new onto the farm, there's always a learning curve that's involved in it. I mean, several growers that have tried cover crops over the last 10 or 15 years have found that they had a yield reduction when they tried them,
And as they got better at it, they got practice with it. It's just like learning to shoot three-pointers. It doesn't happen in day number one. You've got to grind it out. You've got to learn the process, the practices, and get better at it. And once you get better at it, it in fact escalates yield, because what we've done is we provided more water and nitrogen to any system through organic matter production, and those are going to drive yield, whether it's grass yield or grain yield.
The benefits of carbon sequestration go beyond the payment growers receive. Soil health benefits are the real value for the overall operation.
The biggest benefits aren't the payments that they receive for the carbon sequestration. The biggest benefits are the soil health value that they get out of this. The increase in organic matter helps them hold more water. It helps them have better water holding capacity. So when we get these higher intensity rainfall events that come through, less of it's going to go down the creek, more of it's going to go down into the ground and be there. Aggregate stability, all of these terms that we've become more and more familiar with in the last few years around soil health, those are the things that are the real value to an operation. Because while this might be a longer term contract than most growers are used to traditionally in agriculture, the benefits of this are generational. That building that soil health, building organic matter over time is going to be something that their children and grandchildren get an advantage from. And these carbon payments are going to be some capital that help purchase better tools for the operation, whether that's planter technology to go into no-till, whether that's adding fencing and watering into grazing and livestock ground. Those are the kind of things that enable it, but it's really what we're enabling through soil health that brings value.
If carbon sequestration is something you've been looking into, trying new practices and adaptations could benefit your land's soil for generations to come. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.
Thanks, Mike. Next week, we'll dive a bit deeper into some of those terms and conditions of a carbon credit contract, so be sure to tune in to get the full picture. That is going to do it on this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app, or you can follow us on social media to join in the conversation. We hope to see you right back here next time. Until then, I'm Bryce Duskett. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.